It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon at the local supermarket in Willow Creek, a small town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. The air inside the store was cool, carrying the faint smell of fresh produce and baked goods. Jennifer Lewis pushed her cart down the aisles, her mind focused on picking up groceries for the week. She had just returned home on leave from her duties as a senior Army officer, and this simple task felt like a rare moment of normalcy. Jennifer was dressed casually in jeans and a plain blue sweater, her military uniform replaced by clothes that blended seamlessly with the other shoppers. Her short brown hair framed her face and her eyes scanned the shelves with calm efficiency. To anyone who didn't know her, she looked like an ordinary woman running errands. But beneath her composed exterior lay years of discipline, leadership, and sacrifice, a life dedicated to serving her country. As she reached for a box of cereal on the middle shelf, Jennifer noticed someone lingering nearby. At first, she thought, nothing of it. Supermarkets were busy places and people often stood close while browsing. But when she turned slightly, she saw him, a man in his late 30s wearing a leather jacket and scowling at her. His hands were shoved into his pockets, and his posture radiated tension. Something about him made Jennifer uneasy, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. The man's name was Brian Hayes, and he wasn't there to shop. Brian was an off-duty police officer known around town for his quick temper and abrasive personality. He had stopped by the supermarket after finishing his shift, intending to pick up a few items before heading home. But when he spotted Jennifer, someone he didn't recognize, he immediately grew suspicious. In his mind, her presence triggered an instinctive reaction, one rooted in prejudice rather than logic. Brian had a reputation for being confrontational, especially toward people of color. Over the years, several complaints had been filed against him, but none had stuck. His superiors often dismissed them as misunderstandings or blamed the complainants for overreacting. This sense of invincibility emboldened him, making him believe he could act however he wanted without consequences. When Jennifer accidentally bumped into Brian's arm while reaching for the cereal, it set off a chain reaction neither of them anticipated. Startled, she stepped back and offered a polite apology. "Sorry about that," she said softly, her voice steady despite the awkwardness of the moment. But Brian didn't respond kindly. Instead, his scowl deepened and he glared at her as if she'd committed some grave offense. "Watch where you're going," he snapped, his tone sharp and accusatory. Jennifer blinked, taken aback by his hostility. She opened her mouth to explain that it was an accident, but before she could speak, Brian cut her off. "You think you can just walk around here acting all suspicious?" he demanded, his voice rising enough to draw attention from nearby shoppers. Confused, Jennifer frowned. "Suspicious? I'm just shopping," she replied calmly, trying to defuse the situation. She held up the box of cereal in her hand as if to prove her point. "See?" But Brian wasn't listening. His gaze darted around the store, taking in the other customers watching curiously. Embarrassed and defensive, he squared his shoulders and leaned closer to Jennifer, invading her personal space. "Don't play dumb with me," he growled. "I know what you're doing." By now, a small crowd had gathered, murmuring among themselves. Some shoppers exchanged worried glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it. One elderly woman clutched her purse tighter, her knuckles turning white. A young couple with a toddler hesitated near the dairy section, debating whether to leave or stick around. Jennifer took a deep breath, reminding herself to remain calm. Years of training had taught her how to handle high-pressure situations. But this was different. This wasn't combat or a battlefield. It was a grocery store, a place where arguments over parking spots or misplaced carts were the most drama anyone expected. Yet here she was, facing down a man whose anger seemed completely unwarranted. "Sir, I'm not doing anything wrong," Jennifer said firmly, meeting his gaze. "If you have a problem, we can talk about it rationally." Her words only seemed to enrage Brian further. He jabbed a finger in her direction, his movements jerky and aggressive. "Rationally? You think I'm gonna fall for that? I've seen your type before. You think you can waltz into places you don't belong and act innocent." Jennifer's heart sank. His words confirmed what she had begun to suspect. This wasn't about the accidental bump, or even the shopping trip. It was about her skin color, about assumptions Brian had made based solely on appearances. For a brief moment, she considered walking away, letting him rant until he ran out of steam. But something stopped her, the realization that silence would only validate his behavior, giving him permission to continue targeting others like her. "I'm an Army officer," Jennifer said evenly, keeping her voice low but clear. "I've served my country for 15 years. If you want to accuse me of something, at least do it honestly." Brian scoffed, clearly unconvinced. "Oh, sure. Pulling the military card now, huh? Real convenient." Before Jennifer could respond, Brian reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun. The sight of the weapon sent shockwaves through the store. Gasps echoed as shoppers scrambled backward, some ducking behind displays while others froze in place. Children cried, their parents pulling them close in a desperate attempt to shield them from what might happen next. Jennifer's instincts kicked in. She raised her hand slowly, palms open, showing she posed no threat. "There's no need for this," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm unarmed, I'm just here to shop." But Brian wasn't listening anymore. His grip tightened on the gun as he pointed it directly at her chest. "Don't move," he barked, his voice shaking with rage. "Not one step." Time seemed to slow down. Jennifer locked eyes with Brian, searching for any sign of reason or humanity beneath the fury. Around them, the world dissolved into chaos. Phones clicked as bystanders recorded the scene, capturing every tense second. Someone shouted for Brian to lower the weapon, while another pleaded with him to calm down. Through it all, Jennifer stood, still her training keeping panic at bay even as fear clawed at the edges of her mind. Minutes passed, or maybe it was seconds. It was hard to tell. Finally, one brave shopper approached cautiously, holding up a phone. "This is being recorded," they said, their voice trembling but resolute. "Everyone's watching." For the first time, doubt flickered across Brian's face. His grip on the gun loosened slightly, though he didn't lower it entirely. The weight of the situation began to sink in, not just the immediate danger he'd created, but the inevitable fallout once the video went viral. He glanced around, seeing the horrified expressions of the people surrounding him. For a moment, it seemed like he might reconsider, like he might holster the weapon and walk away. But then his pride got the better of him. With a final glare at Jennifer, Brian muttered something under his breath and stormed off, disappearing into the crowd. Only when he was gone did the tension begin to ease. Shoppers exhaled collectively, their bodies sagging with relief. Some rushed to Jennifer's side asking if she was okay. Others called the police, reporting the incident and demanding answers. Jennifer nodded numbly, assuring everyone that she was fine. Physically, she was unharmed, but emotionally, the damage had already been done. The encounter left her shaken, not because of the gun itself, but because of what it represented. The pervasive prejudice that lurked beneath the surface of everyday life, waiting to erupt without warning. As the authorities arrived and took statements, Jennifer found herself replaying the events in her mind. She thought about the sacrifices she'd made for her country, the battles she'd fought both overseas and within herself, and she wondered how someone like Brian Hayes, tasked with protecting others, could harbor such hatred and fear. Little did Jennifer know, this incident would soon become national news, sparking conversations far beyond the walls of the supermarket. But for now, she simply stood there, gripping the handle of her shopping cart, trying to make sense of a world that sometimes felt more dangerous than any war zone. By the time the police arrived at the supermarket, word of the incident had already spread like wildfire. Shoppers who had witnessed Brian Hayes point a gun at Jennifer Lewis were quick to share their accounts with officers, their voices filled with anger and disbelief. Some even handed over videos they had recorded on their phones, capturing every tense moment of the confrontation. The footage was shaky but clear enough to show Brian's aggressive behavior and Jennifer's calm attempts to defuse the situation. Jennifer stayed at the store for hours, answering questions from investigators and providing her side of the story. She described how she had been shopping peacefully when Brian approached her, accused her of suspicious behavior, and eventually pulled out his weapon. Her tone remained steady throughout, though her hands occasionally trembled as she recounted the details. Officers assured her they would take the matter seriously, but Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that justice might not come easily. Meanwhile, Brian Hayes had returned home, his mind racing with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he felt justified in his actions, convinced that Jennifer had somehow deserved his suspicion. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the weight of what he had done, pulling a gun on an unarmed woman in public in front of dozens of witnesses. He tried to convince himself it was just another day on the job, except this time things had spiraled out of control. As the hours passed, news of the incident began to leak online. One shopper uploaded the video to social media, accompanied by a caption explaining what had happened. Within minutes, the post went viral, drawing thousands of views and comments. People were outraged, flooding the comment section with messages of support for Jennifer and calls for accountability against Brian. Hashtags like "Justice for Jennifer" and "Toidir de accountability" now started trending, amplifying the story far beyond Willow. Creek reporters soon picked up on the growing buzz, eager to dig deeper into the details. They discovered that Jennifer Lewis wasn't just any civilian. She was a highly decorated senior Army officer with 15 years of service under her belt. Articles highlighted her achievements, including multiple commendations for bravery and leadership. Photos of her in uniform appeared alongside headlines questioning how someone so accomplished could be treated with such hostility. In contrast, Brian Hayes' background painted a troubling picture. Journalists uncovered a pattern of complaints filed against him by residents of Willow Creek, many alleging racial profiling and excessive force. Though none of these complaints had resulted in disciplinary action, they raised serious questions about his conduct as an officer. Critics argued that his superiors had turned a blind eye to his behavior, allowing it to escalate unchecked until it culminated in the supermarket incident. Back at the police department, Brian's colleagues struggled to distance themselves from the fallout. His captain called him into the office the next morning, demanding an explanation. Brian sat stiffly in the chair across from his superior, his jaw clenched as he defended his actions. "She bumped into me," he insisted, repeating the same justification he had given earlier. "And then she acted all high and mighty, like she was better than me." His captain sighed, rubbing his temples. "Brian, you pointed a loaded gun at an unarmed woman in public. Do you understand how bad this looks, not just for you, but for the entire department?" "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," Brian muttered, avoiding eye contact. I thought she was up to something." "That's not good enough," the captain said firmly. "We have videos, witness statements, and now national attention on this case. You're suspended pending further investigation." The news hit Brian like a punch to the gut. Suspension meant no pay, no badge, and no authority. A stark reminder of how quickly his life could unravel. He left the office in silence, his head bowed as whispers followed him down the hallway. Some officers avoided meeting his gaze, while others exchanged uneasy glances. No one wanted to be associated with the man who had become the face of police misconduct overnight. While Brian grappled with the consequences of his actions, Jennifer found herself thrust into the spotlight. Friends and family reached out to check on her. Their concern mingled with pride at how she had handled the situation. Her commanding officer called personally to offer support, urging her to take time to recover if needed. But Jennifer refused to let the incident derail her plans. She had worked too hard to let fear dictate her life. Still, the emotional toll was undeniable. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Jennifer replayed the events in her mind. She thought about the look in Brian's eyes, the mixture of anger and disdain, and wondered how someone could harbor such hatred toward a stranger. It wasn't the first time she had encountered prejudice, but this encounter felt different. This time it had escalated to a level she hadn't anticipated, leaving her shaken in ways she couldn't fully articulate. The following days brought a flood of media requests, with reporters clamoring for interviews. At first, Jennifer declined, unsure if she wanted to relive the ordeal publicly. But as she scrolled through social media, reading messages from people who had been inspired by her courage, she began to reconsider. These weren't just random strangers, they were individuals who had faced similar experiences and found solace in knowing they weren't alone. One message stood out in particular. A young woman named Maria wrote about being racially profiled during a traffic stop, describing how the officer had treated her with disdain despite finding nothing wrong. "Seeing your story gave me hope," Maria wrote. "It reminded me that we can stand up for ourselves without backing down, even when it feels impossible." Moved by the outpouring of support, Jennifer agreed to speak with a local journalist. The interview took place in her living room where she sat comfortably on the couch, dressed in casual clothes. The journalist, a kind-eyed woman named Rachel, asked thoughtful questions that allowed Jennifer to share her perspective without sensationalizing the incident. "Do you think this was about race?" Rachel asked gently, leaning forward slightly. Jennifer hesitated before answering. "I can't say for sure what was going through his mind," she said slowly. "But based on what he said and how he acted, it's hard not to see it that way. He made assumptions about me without knowing anything about who I am or what I've done." Rachel nodded, scribbling notes in her notebook. "What do you hope comes out of this?" Jennifer paused, choosing her words carefully. "I hope it starts a conversation," she said finally. The investigation into the supermarket incident began swiftly, with internal affairs officers diving deep into Brian Hayes' past. They reviewed every complaint filed against him, no matter how minor it seemed. Witnesses from the store were called in to give formal statements, and the video footage became a key piece of evidence. For Jennifer Lewis, this was both reassuring and exhausting. She attended meetings, answered questions repeatedly, and watched as her life became part of a larger narrative about accountability and justice. One by one, shoppers who had been present that day recounted what they saw. A middle-aged man named Paul described how Brian's aggression escalated without provocation. "He just kept yelling at her," Paul said during his testimony. "She wasn't doing anything wrong, just standing there trying to explain herself. And then he pulled out the gun. It was terrifying." Another witness, a young mother named Lisa, recalled how Jennifer remained calm despite the danger. "She didn't scream or cry," Lisa told investigators. "She just stood there, hands up, like she was trained for something like this. It made me realize how strong she must be." These testimonies painted a clear picture of Brian's behavior, but the most damning evidence came from the videos. The shaky footage showed everything: the accidental bump, Brian's hostile reaction, and the moment he drew his weapon. His face was visible, his body language unmistakably aggressive. When played back during interviews, even Brian's colleagues struggled to justify his actions. As the investigation unfolded, Brian grew increasingly defensive. He lashed out at anyone who questioned him, accusing them of bias and exaggeration. During one heated exchange with an investigator, he slammed his fist on the table. "You don't understand," he shouted. "I was protecting myself. You weren't there." You didn't see how she acted. But the more he protested, the less credible he seemed. His superiors, once reluctant to take action, now found themselves under immense pressure to hold him accountable. Local activists organized protests outside the police station, holding signs that read, "No more excuses," and "Justice for Jennifer." News outlets covered the demonstrations, amplifying the voices of those demanding change. Jennifer watched all of this unfold from afar, feeling a mix of emotions. On one hand, she was grateful for the support, a wave of solidarity from strangers who believed in fairness and equality. On the other hand, she couldn't help but feel drained. Every news report, every social media post reminded her of the trauma she had endured. Though she tried to focus on her daily routine, the incident lingered in her mind like a shadow she couldn't shake. Her commanding officer reached out again, offering her the option to extend her leave. "Take as much time as you need," he said over the phone. "We're proud of you, Jennifer, but we also know this has been difficult. Don't rush back until you're ready." Jennifer appreciated the gesture but declined. She didn't want to let fear dictate her decisions. Instead, she decided to channel her energy into something positive. Inspired by the messages of support she had received, she began thinking about ways to use her platform to spark meaningful change. Around this time, she met Alex Carter, a journalist covering stories related to racial injustice. Alex had been following Jennifer's case closely and reached out to propose an idea: a documentary series highlighting cases of police misconduct and systemic racism. "Your story is powerful," Alex explained during their first meeting. "It could inspire others to speak up and push for reform." At first, Jennifer hesitated. The thought of revisiting the incident and potentially facing backlash was daunting. But as Alex shared examples of other victims who had come forward, she realized the potential impact of such a project. These were people whose voices had been silenced, whose experiences had been dismissed. By sharing their stories alongside hers, Jennifer could help amplify their fight for justice. With Alex's encouragement, Jennifer agreed to collaborate on the documentary. Together, they began reaching out to individuals who had faced similar situations, people who had been profiled, harassed, or mistreated by law enforcement. Each interview was emotional, raw, and deeply personal. One woman tearfully described being handcuffed in front of her children during a routine traffic stop. A college student recounted being followed through a store simply because of the color of his skin. Their stories echoed Jennifer's own experience, underscoring the widespread nature of the problem. As the project gained momentum, so did public interest. Clips from early interviews were released online, drawing attention from advocacy groups and lawmakers alike. People praised Jennifer for her courage, calling her a role model for standing up against injustice. Yet not everyone was supportive. Some critics accused her of exaggerating the incident, while others claimed she was using her military status to gain sympathy. These comments stung, but Jennifer refused to let them derail her mission. Behind the scenes, the investigation into Brian Hayes continued. Internal affairs officers presented their findings to the police chief, detailing years of unchecked misconduct. Complaints from residents revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior, including racial slurs and unnecessary force. Even Brian's colleagues admitted privately that they had concerns about his temperament, but feared speaking out due to retaliation. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the department had no choice but to act. In a press conference held weeks after the incident, the police chief announced Brian's dismissal. After a thorough review of the facts, he stated, "We have determined that Officer Hayes violated our policies and failed to uphold the key standards expected of him as a member of this department. Effective immediately, he is terminated." The announcement brought a mix of relief and frustration. For many, it was a step in the right direction, a sign that accountability was possible. But others pointed out that firing Brian was only the beginning. True reform would require addressing the systemic issues that allowed someone like him to remain in power for so long. Jennifer watched the press conference from home, her feelings complicated. On one hand, she felt vindicated knowing that Brian's actions had consequences. On the other hand, she knew the work wasn't over. Firing one officer wouldn't erase decades of prejudice and inequality. Still, she chose to focus on the progress rather than dwell on the challenges ahead. In the days that followed, Jennifer threw herself into the documentary project, determined to keep the conversation going. She and Alex traveled to different cities, meeting with activists, scholars, and community leaders. They discussed ways to implement reforms, from improving training programs to establishing independent oversight boards. Jennifer also spoke at town hall meetings, sharing her story and encouraging others to demand better from their institutions. Through it all, she remained grounded, drawing strength from the people around her. Her family offered unwavering support, reminding her why the fight mattered. Friends sent messages of encouragement, praising her resilience and determination. Even strangers approached her in public, thanking her for speaking out. These moments reinforced her belief that change was possible, even if it required patience and perseverance. As the weeks turned into months, Jennifer began to feel a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. The incident at the supermarket had been traumatic, yes, but it had also ignited a fire within her. She realized that her role wasn't just to serve her country on the battlefield, it was to advocate for justice wherever it was needed. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, she was ready to face it head-on. For now, Jennifer focused on the small victories. Legislative proposals aimed at increasing police accountability were gaining traction. Community organizations were hosting workshops to educate citizens about their rights. And slowly but surely, conversations about race and privilege were becoming more common, not just in Willow Creek but across the nation. Jennifer knew the journey was far from over. There would still be setbacks, resistance, and moments of doubt. But as she looked back on everything she had accomplished since that fateful day at the supermarket, she felt a glimmer of hope. Change might not happen overnight, but it was happening, and she was proud to be part of it. As the weeks turned into months, Jennifer Lewis found herself busier than ever. The documentary project with Alex Carter had gained momentum, drawing attention from across the country. People were eager to hear stories of resilience and courage, especially from someone like Jennifer who had faced prejudice head-on. Her calm demeanor and unwavering determination made her a natural speaker, and soon she became a familiar face at community events, advocacy meetings, and even university lectures. Jennifer's schedule was packed, but she didn't mind. For the first time in years, she felt like she was making a real difference, not just for herself but for others who had been silenced or ignored. At every event, she shared her story with honesty and vulnerability, encouraging people to speak up when they witnessed injustice. "Silence only protects those who don't deserve protection," she often said during her speeches. "We have to hold each other accountable." Her words resonated deeply, particularly with young people. Students would line up after her talks asking questions about leadership, activism, and how to stay hopeful in difficult times. Jennifer listened patiently, offering advice based on her own experiences. "You don't have to be perfect to make a difference," she told them. "Sometimes just showing up is enough." Despite the growing support, not everyone welcomed Jennifer's newfound role as an advocate. Anonymous messages began appearing in her inbox, some critical, others outright threatening. One email read, "Mind your own business if you know what's good for you." Another warned, "You're stirring up trouble no one asked for." At first, these threats unsettled her. She double-checked her locks at night and avoided walking alone in unfamiliar places. But over time, she realized that fear couldn't dictate her choices. If anything, the backlash only strengthened her resolve. "They're scared because they know we're onto something," she told Alex during one of their planning sessions. "That means we're doing something right." Alex nodded, though his expression remained concerned. He knew better than anyone how dangerous it could be to challenge entrenched systems of power. Still, he admired Jennifer's courage and did everything he could to ensure her safety. They hired a security consultant to review her routines and installed cameras around her home. These precautions gave Jennifer peace of mind, allowing her to focus on the work ahead. The documentary series premiered to widespread acclaim. Each episode highlighted a different case of police misconduct, featuring interviews with victims, activists, and experts. Jennifer's segment aired in the third episode, capturing both the trauma of the supermarket incident and her journey toward advocacy. Viewers praised the series for its honesty and depth, calling it a wake-up call for anyone unaware of the challenges marginalized communities face daily. The response was overwhelming. Social media lit up with hashtags like "Enough is Enough" and "You Justice for All," while petitions demanding reform gathered thousands of signatures. Lawmakers cited the documentary during debates, urging colleagues to take action against systemic racism within law enforcement. Even some police departments expressed interest in collaborating with advocacy groups to improve training programs and rebuild trust. But progress came with pushback. Critics argued that the documentary exaggerated the problem, accusing Jennifer and Alex of sensationalizing isolated incidents. Others claimed the series unfairly targeted officers who put their lives on the line every day. Some went so far as to launch smear campaigns, questioning Jennifer's credibility and motives. One evening, while scrolling through Twitter, Jennifer stumbled upon a thread attacking her character. Commenters accused her of exploiting her military status for personal gain, dismissing her efforts as self-serving. Though hurt by the accusations, she reminded herself that criticism was inevitable. "If you're not pissing someone off, you're probably not doing much," Alex joked when she showed him the thread. Jennifer laughed despite herself, grateful for his ability to lighten the mood. Amid the chaos, Jennifer found solace in small victories. In Willow Creek, residents organized workshops aimed at fostering dialogue between law enforcement and the community. Officers participated alongside civilians, learning strategies to de-escalate conflicts and address implicit bias. Similar initiatives popped up in neighboring towns, inspired by the success of the original program. Jennifer attended one of these workshops, sitting quietly in the back as participants shared their thoughts. A young officer named Ryan spoke candidly about his struggles balancing authority with empathy. "I joined the force because I wanted to help people," he admitted. "But sometimes it feels like the system works against us instead of with us." His honesty struck a chord with Jennifer. After the session ended, she approached him and offered a few words of encouragement. "It takes guts to admit when things aren't working," she said. "Keep pushing for change. It matters more than you think." Ryan smiled, thanking her for the kind words. Moments like these reminded Jennifer why she had chosen this path. While sweeping reforms might still feel distant, individual connections could plant seeds of understanding and growth. Back at home, Jennifer reflected on how much her life had changed since the supermarket incident. What had started as a single act of aggression had transformed into a movement, one she never imagined leading. Yet here she was, standing at the forefront of a fight for justice, driven by a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Her commanding officer called periodically to check in, expressing pride in her advocacy work. "You're inspiring people in ways you might not even realize," he told her during one conversation. "Don't lose sight of that." Jennifer appreciated the sentiment but knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Pushing for systemic change required patience, persistence, and resilience, all qualities she had honed during her military career. Still, she allowed herself moments of hope, imagining a future where accountability and equality weren't just ideals, but realities. One afternoon, while reviewing notes for an upcoming speech, Jennifer received an unexpected visitor. It was Maria, the young woman who had written to her earlier about being racially profiled during a traffic stop. Maria stood nervously at the door, clutching a folder filled with papers. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by," Maria said, softly. "I wanted to thank you in person." Jennifer invited her inside, offering tea as they sat down to talk. Maria explained that seeing Jennifer's story had inspired her to pursue a career in criminal justice reform. "I used to feel powerless," she confessed, "but hearing you speak made me realize I can use my voice to make a difference." Touched by Maria's words, Jennifer encouraged her to keep going. "Change starts with people like you, said. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As they parted ways later that evening, Jennifer felt a renewed sense of purpose. Every interaction, every story, reinforced her belief that collective effort could overcome even the most stubborn obstacles. Though the fight for justice was far from over, she knew she wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. As the months passed, Jennifer Lewis became a symbol of resilience and determination. Her advocacy work had grown beyond anything she could have imagined, but it wasn't without its challenges. The pushback against her efforts intensified, with critics accusing her of dividing communities rather than uniting them. Some local leaders dismissed her calls for reform as unnecessary meddling, while others argued that focusing on individual cases like hers ignored the broader complexities of law enforcement. Despite the resistance, Jennifer refused to back down. She knew that real change often came slowly and painfully, especially when challenging deeply entrenched systems. Each setback only fueled her resolve. "If they're fighting this hard," she told Alex during one late-night strategy session, "it means we're hitting a nerve." Alex nodded in agreement. "That's how you know you're onto something important. Just don't let them wear you down." Jennifer appreciated his support. Over time, Their partnership had evolved into a close friendship, built on mutual respect and shared goals. Alex handled the logistics of organizing events and managing media inquiries, allowing Jennifer to focus on connecting with people. Together, they made a formidable team, balancing idealism with practicality. One of the biggest hurdles Jennifer faced was addressing misconceptions about police officers as a whole. Many supporters of law enforcement argued that criticizing bad actors tarnished the reputation of all officers, including those who served honorably. Jennifer understood this concern and worked hard to clarify her position. "This isn't about demonizing anyone," she said during an interview. "It's about holding people accountable for their actions and for the systems that enable harm. Good cops should want better training and oversight just as much as we do." Her words struck a chord with some members of the police community. Officers began reaching out privately, sharing their frustrations about outdated policies and lack of resources. One veteran officer named Greg admitted that he had witnessed misconduct early in his career, but felt powerless to report it. "I didn't want to be labeled a troublemaker," he explained, "but now I see how staying silent hurt everyone involved." These conversations gave Jennifer hope. While systemic issues couldn't be solved overnight, building bridges between communities and law enforcement was a crucial step forward. She encouraged open dialogue wherever possible, hosting forums where citizens and officers could share their perspectives. Though tensions sometimes ran high, these discussions planted seeds of understanding that might grow over time. Meanwhile, Jennifer continued working on the documentary series with Alex. The second season focused on grassroots movements, led by ordinary people fighting for justice in their neighborhoods. From youth-led protests to community patrols aimed at reducing crime, the stories highlighted the power of collective action. Jennifer appeared in several episodes, offering insights based on her own experiences. The response to the new season was overwhelmingly positive. Viewers praised the series for showcasing diverse voices and solutions-oriented approaches. Schools incorporated the episodes into their curricula, sparking classroom discussions about privilege, bias, and civic responsibility. Activists credited the project with inspiring a new wave of engagement among younger generations, but not everyone welcomed the attention. Anonymous threats against Jennifer escalated, forcing her to take additional security measures. One night, someone left a threatening note taped to her front door. It read, "Stop before it's too late." Shaken but undeterred, Jennifer contacted the authorities and tightened her home security system. She also leaned on her support network, family, friends, and colleagues, who reminded her that fear couldn't dictate her life. "I'm not going to let them win," she told Alex firmly after the incident. "If they think intimidation will stop me, they don't know me very well." Alex admired her courage but remained vigilant, ensuring Jennifer had access to professional protection whenever needed. He also helped her develop strategies for handling hostile situations, such as deflecting inflammatory comments during public appearances. These skills proved invaluable as Jennifer faced increasingly aggressive opposition. In Willow Creek, progress came in small but meaningful ways. The workshops initiated by residents gained traction, with more officers volunteering to participate. Local leaders introduced pilot programs aimed at improving accountability, such as body cameras and independent review boards. While these changes were far from perfect, they represented tangible steps toward reform. Jennifer attended one of these program launches, standing alongside activists and officials as they unveiled the new initiatives. "This is just the beginning," she said during her speech. "True justice requires constant effort and collaboration. But if we keep listening to each other and pushing for better, we can create a safer, fairer future for everyone." Her optimism resonated with the crowd, earning applause and cheers. Even skeptics couldn't deny the energy in the room, a shared belief that change was possible if people worked together. Behind the scenes, however, Jennifer struggled with moments of doubt. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the day's demands faded away, she allowed herself to reflect on the toll this fight had taken. She missed the simplicity of her pre-supermarket life, when her biggest concerns revolved around deployments and family visits. Now every decision carried weight, every word mattered, and every misstep risked derailing the progress she had fought so hard to achieve. Yet even in her darkest moments, Jennifer found reasons to keep going. Messages of gratitude poured in, daily, from strangers inspired by her courage to fellow advocates seeking guidance. One letter stood out in particular. Written by a teenage girl named Emma, it described how Jennifer's story had motivated her to join her school's social justice club. "You've shown me that one person can make a difference," Emma wrote. "Thank you for being brave enough to stand up." Reading those words brought tears to Jennifer's eyes. They reminded her why she had chosen this path, not for recognition or praise, but because it was the right thing to do. Every voice mattered, no matter how small, and every effort contributed to something larger than any one individual. As the year drew to a close, Jennifer took stock of everything she had accomplished. The supermarket incident had been a turning point, forcing her to confront prejudice head-on and inspiring her to use her platform for good. Along the way, she had connected with countless people, some allies, others adversaries, all united by a desire for fairness and equality. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, Jennifer felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. She knew the fight for justice would never truly end, but she also knew she wasn't alone. With each victory, no matter how minor, she grew more confident in the possibility of lasting change. Progress isn't linear, she reminded herself, one evening as she sat by the window watching snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. It's messy and imperfect, but it's worth it. And with that thought, Jennifer smiled softly, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Months turned into a year since the incident at the supermarket, and Jennifer Lewis found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed. What began as a traumatic encounter had transformed into a journey of purpose, one that pushed her to confront not only prejudice but also her own fears and doubts. Now standing in front of a packed auditorium at a community center in Willow Creek, she felt a mix of gratitude and determination. The room buzzed with energy as people gathered to hear her final speech before returning to active duty. Jennifer took a deep breath, adjusting the microphone slightly. Her military uniform fit snugly, its weight familiar yet grounding. She scanned the audience, families, activists, law enforcement officers, and students, and smiled softly. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady and warm. "This isn't just my story anymore. It's ours." She paused, letting the words sink in. Over the past year, Jennifer had traveled across the country, met countless individuals, and witnessed both heartbreak and hope. Each interaction had reinforced her belief that change was possible, even if it required patience and persistence. "When I stood in that supermarket last year, I never imagined this would be where I'd end up," she continued. "But sometimes, life pushes us toward paths we didn't plan for, and when it does, we have two choices: stay stuck or move forward." Her gaze lingered on Maria, who sat near the front row with tears in her eyes. Maria had recently graduated from college and now worked as an intern for a nonprofit focused on criminal justice reform. Seeing her there reminded Jennifer of the ripple effect created by speaking out. Every act of courage inspired others to take their first steps toward making a difference. Jennifer went on to talk about the challenges they still faced. Systemic racism wasn't something that could be dismantled overnight. Laws needed rewriting, policies required updating, and attitudes demanded shifting. But progress was happening, however slowly. Pilot programs like body cameras and independent oversight boards were spreading to other towns. Activists and officers were collaborating more openly than ever before. Even small victories like workshops fostering dialogue between communities and police departments mattered deeply. "I've learned that fighting for justice isn't always glamorous," Jennifer admitted, her tone thoughtful. "It's messy. It's frustrating. Sometimes it feels like you're taking one step forward and two steps back. But every effort counts. Every conversation matters. Because together, we're building momentum." As she spoke, memories of the past year flashed through her mind. The late nights spent editing the documentary with Alex, the anonymous threats that tested her resolve, the moments of doubt when she wondered if she was doing enough. Yet through it all, she had been surrounded by people who believed in her mission. Family members sent encouraging texts, friends offered shoulders to lean on, and strangers reached out with messages of support. These connections kept her going during the toughest times. After finishing her speech, Jennifer stepped off the stage, to thunderous applause. People lined up to thank her, shake her hand, or simply share a hug. One elderly woman handed her a folded American flag. "For everything you've done," the woman said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You remind us what this country can stand for." Jennifer accepted the gift with a lump in her throat. She held the flag tightly, feeling its symbolism weigh heavily in her hands, not just of sacrifice but of unity and justice worth striving for. Later that evening, as Jennifer packed her bags for deployment, she thought about the road ahead. Returning to active duty meant stepping away from the advocacy work that had consumed her life for the past year. But she knew her mission wasn't ending, it was evolving. Through the documentary series, ongoing partnerships with activists, and the network she had built, her voice would continue to resonate. Alex stopped by her house to say goodbye. They sat on the porch sipping coffee as twilight settled over the neighborhood. "You've done incredible work," Alex said, his tone earnest. "Don't lose sight of that once you're gone." "I won't," Jennifer replied, smiling, faintly. "But I also know this fight belongs to everyone now. It doesn't rest solely on my shoulders, or yours. That's the beauty of it." Alex nodded, understanding completely. Together, they reminisced about the highs and lows of the past year, the moments of triumph and the times when setbacks felt insurmountable. Both agreed that while the journey had been exhausting, it had also been profoundly rewarding. The next morning, Jennifer arrived at the airport early, her uniform crisp and her posture straight. As she walked through security and boarded the plane, she carried with her not just physical belongings but lessons learned and relationships forged. The passengers around her chatted idly, unaware of the battles she had fought or the impact she had made. To them, she was just another traveler. But inside, she carried a quiet pride in knowing she had contributed to something larger than herself. During the flight, Jennifer gazed out the window at the clouds below. Her thoughts drifted to Brian Hayes, whose dismissal had sparked national conversations about accountability within law enforcement. Though he had faded into obscurity, his actions served as a reminder of the consequences of unchecked prejudice. More importantly, they highlighted the importance of holding individuals and institutions responsible for their behavior. Jennifer also thought about the countless others who had shared their stories with her. Victims of profiling, harassment, and injustice had trusted her with their pain, hoping it might lead to change. Their courage humbled her and reinforced her commitment to continuing the fight, even in different ways. When the plane touched down at her destination, Jennifer stepped onto the tarmac, the cool air brushing against her face. Soldiers greeted her warmly, saluting as she passed. For a moment, she felt a pang of nostalgia for the simplicity of military life. The clear rules, structured routines, and sense of camaraderie. But she knew her experiences over the past year had reshaped her perspective forever. In the days that followed, Jennifer threw herself into her duties, balancing leadership responsibilities with moments of reflection. During briefings, she encouraged her team to think critically about fairness and empathy, not just in combat but in everyday interactions. "We're here to serve," she reminded them. "That means protecting everyone equally." Back in Willow Creek, life moved forward without her physical presence, but her influence remained. Workshops expanded to include neighboring towns. Schools incorporated discussions about systemic racism into their curricula. Lawmakers introduced legislation aimed at increasing transparency within law enforcement agencies. None of these changes happened overnight, but each represented progress, a testament to the collective effort Jennifer had helped inspire. Months later, Jennifer received a letter from Emma, the teenage girl who had written to her earlier. Now, a high school senior, Emma described how she had organized a student-led initiative to address bias in her community. "Because of you, I realized I could make a difference," Emma wrote. "Thank you for showing me that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about moving forward anyway." Reading the letter brought tears to Jennifer's eyes. It reminded her why she had chosen this path, to create a world where future generations wouldn't have to face the same struggles she had endured. While the fight for justice was far from over, she took comfort in knowing she had played a part in moving society closer to equality. As Jennifer stood under the stars one night during deployment, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but she was ready to face them. With every step she took, she carried the lessons of resilience, compassion, and hope, not just for herself, but for everyone counting on her to keep pushing forward. And so, Jennifer Lewis moved onward, carrying both scars and newfound purpose. The journey was daunting yet hopeful, filled with obstacles and opportunities alike. But for Jennifer, the fight was worth it, a testament to the belief that unity and justice were ideals worth fighting for, no matter how long it took to achieve them.